Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. Let's wait a couple of minutes for more people to join. I see more people are joining in. Perhaps wait a couple more seconds. All right. So hi, everyone, and welcome to Privacy Sandbox, a deep dive into remarketing. We're very happy to have you. My name is Roy. I lead a product at AppsFlyer. I lead the measurement products, that is attribution, SDK, anti-fraud, also Scan and Sandbox. With me are Trenton. So he leads, oversees Privacy Sandbox, protected audiences API within Google Sandbox. And Loic.
Hi everyone, so I'm Loic. I'm a Chief Product Officer at Adikteev, which is a mobile DSP that helps app marketers retain their users through retargeting, especially, and also churn prediction tools.
Awesome. So while we run through this webinar, please feel free to ask questions during the webinar, and we will address your questions at the end of this session. Cool. So without further ado, let's get started. So I think we're seeing a lot of changes in the market, and I feel the mobile ecosystem is one of the most fast evolving one with regards to technology, with regards to adoption, and also with regards to privacy. And we're seeing that this is an ever shifting landscape. We've seen quite several milestones over the years, and we see Privacy Sandbox as the next one. Now, I think in retrospect, and having been in AppsFlyer for the past 7 years, whenever there's like a big change ahead of you, it seems like a really big one and a major one, and could be scary from time to time for advertisers, for all of the ecosystem, right? But in the end, in retrospect, we see as how we as an ecosystem overcame, adapted into these changes, and we are very confident in our ability to also do that with Privacy Sandbox, and rest assured that performance marketing will be even better than ever. So and when we look at privacy, and this is AppsFlyer perspective, all right, when we look at privacy and how it looks like from end users' good experience, what is a good experience from that end users expect? In terms of privacy, they expect obviously consent and control over their data, what they're sharing, how it's shared. They expect transparency, and they also expect data minimization. So it's not only good that you provide consent and control, but also please use as little as possible when you're collecting data. And this needs to go hand in hand also with personalization. End user experience is also comprised out of product discovery, relevance, to see things that are relevant to me, and to have a good contextual experience, which is the latter. So when end users move from one either website to a different one, or from one app to another, or cross-platform, cross-device, the expectation from us as an industry is that this experience will be contextual, right? And then obviously also with regards to brand and consumer relationship, how I want the solutions, the experience that I have with this business is to be tailored for my experience. So all of these come together, and they need to work together. And then from the advertiser point of view, app developers, a good privacy solution should have three pillars that are not each one is independent of the other, but these are really important three main pillars. One is targeting signals, right? The ability to show relevant ads to the right users. Second one is attribution, measurement. How did the ad perform? How did the ad impact the user actions? And obviously, again, this really affects one another, because attribution really fuels targeting and provides for better ad relevance. And then also remarketing, to bring users again, to activate them. And that also is relying on both ad relevance and attribution. So all of these kind of work together, obviously, but these are three main pillars that we see that app developers and ad networks want from a good privacy solution. So remember these pillars, because we're going to touch on them very soon. And when we look at Privacy Sandbox Solutions on mobile, what we currently see is four different solutions. So there's the SDK runtime, there's the attribution API, topics, and protected audiences API. As far as the way I see it, and again, representing AppsFlyer here, we see attribution API, topics, and protected audiences API more bundled together. These are solutions for a future unknown, could be deprecation of Google Advertising ID or any other heavy impact actions that will impact the way that we work today. And then there's also the SDK runtime, which is a new way, privacy enhancing way of SDKs to work. This is of itself very exciting, but this is kind of independent of the three solutions the way we see it. And by the way, notice how these three solutions go hand in hand with the pillars that I've mentioned earlier. So attribution APIs is here to do measurement, attribution, obviously. Topics is for targeting mainly, and protected audiences API is for remarketing and audiences management. Again, as very descriptive by the name. Cool. So in this session, we're going to focus on attribution API, topics, and specifically focus on protected audiences API. But I do want to kind of cover before that the other two solutions, which are attribution API and topics. What is the attribution API? It's an on-device Let's Click attribution solution. It's supported by Android, by the operating system. And it's privacy-centric. No user data is exchanged between any party. This is the important part of it. Main feature, as far as we see it, as the MMP. MMP determines cross-network Let's Click. This is really important. Every ad network, it can potentially have attribution according to their own Let's Click, but for multiple clicks from different ad networks, only MMP can help determine cross-network Let's Click. Attribution API has flexible look-back window. This is controlled by the advertiser MMP per ad network. This is really important. Up to 30 days of LTV measurement. Web to app is supported from the get-go. Also app to web, which is less common, but also supported. And there's a detailed campaign and LTV breakdown, which is also really important. One thing that is not written here, data freshness is pretty good. So you'll have aggregate data within the same day, basically within hours of since conversion took place in aggregate manner. Topics. Topics, what is it? As I mentioned before, this is really directed towards targeting. So it's an interest-based cross-app targeting solution. Again, supported by the operating system. And again, here, no user data is exchanged between any party. Topics, again, the name is very clear. It's a list of things that you and I, it's human readable things that you and I can explain, things like mattresses or sports or anything that users might be interested in. At the moment, it's being built by the operating system, mostly with the user's app usage on the device. A publisher app can request a list of topics from the operating system and then decide whether it's using now optimizing toward the topics or whether maybe contextual thing that has happened within the publisher app. This is then later up for the publisher app to decide. And one really important thing is that users can easily control the list of topics or completely opt out of it. And now we're getting to the focus of this webinar. So protected audiences API. This is an on-device audiences management and retargeting solution. It enables on-device audience and creation and bidding. And again, like any of these solutions, no user data is exchanged by any party. What are the main features of the Audiences API? So advertisers or also AppsFlyer on their behalf can add app users to custom audiences. Then these custom audiences, ad networks can define oh, sorry, one sec, I'll get to that. One use case is for advertisers to define audience on their app, but another use case is for ad networks to communicate with AppsFlyer to create an audience on their behalf, all right? And then once audience is created, doesn't matter if it's initiated from the advertiser side or initiated by the ad network side, once an audience is created, ad networks can target these users based on the audience defined by either the advertiser or the ad network. Something interesting is that the bidding for protected audiences happens on device. Main changes for advertisers. One, it's harder to manage audiences in-house. SDK presence is required to create custom audiences, as well as integration with any ad network that you would like to define audiences for will be required in order to get audiences or to communicate audiences back to the ad networks. So each of ad network that you would want to start working with, you would need to create an integration with. Users can decide to opt in or opt out of protected audiences API. Users can only be added to audiences while the app is active. Okay, that's one thing that's different from the way it works today. Main challenges for ad networks, for partners. So on the buy side, SDK presence is required to create custom audiences. Again, this, as I mentioned, can be worked out with us MMP. On the buy side, it's required to build bidding logic that incorporates on-device signals. And on the sell side, it's required to build on-device ad selection processes. Let's dive a little bit. I'll try to go fast over this, not to get too technical, but the way the world works today with regards to audiences management is used a lot with Google Advertising ID or other identifiers. But in the end, once a user takes action within the advertiser app, in-app events, sessions, etc., are propagated with AppsFlyer SDK to AppsFlyer, and then with AppsFlyer's audiences tool, the advertiser can configure to create an audience based on some segmentation, and then send this audience, these users to the ad platform, and then target these users based on any campaign on the ad platform side. And then these users, once they appear on the publisher app, they can be targeted by the ad network, right? This is the way the world works today. How does the world works tomorrow? And this is assuming an advertiser decided to initiate a custom audience. All right. So first, a custom audience is set up on AppsFlyer. Second, AppsFlyer reports this audience creation to the ad platform. All right. Now, on the ad network side, advertiser configure ads, bids, and custom audiences, targeting, etc. Then, assuming everything is going well, once a user fits the description of the segmentation, AppsFlyer notifies Protected Audiences API that this user needs to be added to this audience and fetch custom audience from the ad platform. Then Protected Audiences API reaches out to the specific ad platform for which this audience was created, and asks for the ads for this type of users and for the bidding logic. Then in the end, the ad monetization SDK, there's a whole ad selection process for which these users are being shown with the ads that were loaded from before. Okay, and finally, ad is displayed and impression is reported. All right, this is assuming the advertiser decided to create an audience on AppsFlyer and communicate that to the ad network. Now, the other way around is that the advertiser decides to create the audience on the ad platform side, and then it's very much similar, all right? But then this communication would work the other way around. So AppsFlyer still needs to kind of report the audience, every user, to Protected Audiences API, but the way things are initiated is from the ad platform to AppsFlyer, and then AppsFlyer lets Protected Audiences API know that this user needs to be added to this audience. Okay, I'm not gonna repeat the next slides. Hopefully that was clear. Sorry if I got into too many technical details. Key takeaways. One, we believe Sandbox is superior to Scan. I think a lot of times it's being compared, but there are more solutions. So maybe the comparison is between Scan and Attribution API, but in the end, Sandbox has more solutions for us as an industry. Number two, MVP is critical. I hope that was clear in that sense, both on Attribution API, but also on Protected Audiences API, with regards to all the integrations that are required and also working the different solutions. Number three, we're happy to welcome a partner and advertisers to collaborate and test with us and shape the future of remarketing. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Loic.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roy. So on my end, so from the DSP perspective, looking at this protected audience feature from Android, I think the first question that comes to our mind is remarketing still going to be possible? Because that's the thing. Privacy creates like constraints, but we want to maintain the use cases. So yes, I think that one of our first takeaways on the DSP side is that for us as well, remarketing at scale will still be possible, even with the Google Advertising ID deprecation, if it happens someday, thanks to this feature. So just reminding the few steps that you've already mentioned, Roy, but from our point of view, it happens basically in 4 steps. The first one is the audience creation. I think you've covered it quite extensively. Thank you for that. Then what's going to happen for us as a DSP is that users who will have been added to the audiences on device, those devices will start sending ad requests to our platform, to our bidder, and indicating which audience they belong to. So basically, instead of having an ad request that contains a device ID, like most of them today, you will get another request with an audience identifier. So I'm going to know the audience, but not precisely the user I'm bidding on. But that's good enough to maintain the remarketing use case at scale. Now, the third and fourth steps are quite classic. Adikteev will report impressions and clicks to Android attribution API that we saw also, and also to AppsFlyer for their own attribution systems. And finally, AppsFlyer will decide who is the last click, and cross network deduplication and these kind of things. So what's really important here to insist on is that it's completely different to iOS 14 that you were mentioning, Roy, on your very first slide, with the mountain. Like the last key step, like back in 2021 was iOS 14. Here we have to insist on the fact that the approach is completely different. We might end up removing the GID, even maybe on all devices and not just a subset of them, like on iOS. But the use case of having deterministic remarketing at scale remains. It's handled without GID, but the use case remains. Yeah, and so again, looking at the key features of this audience management service offered by Protected Audience API, doesn't need device IDs. That's obvious. That also opens the door to having device IDs disappear someday, but that's okay. Because again, the audience management feature will keep on sending ad requests to remarketing DSPs like Adikteev, even without having the device ID. That's also how obviously data privacy is ensured. The audience stays on device, and the device is the only one who knows whether it belongs to an audience or not. So no need to keep the state of the audience somewhere else. And I think that's the key objective here, not having to share those device IDs everywhere, and that's basically doable with this feature. So what kind of audiences can we do with Protected Audience API? I think that's also a good question, because today with the sophistication of remarketing and all kind of various kind of use cases, one could ask, okay, so what kind of audiences can I do? So far, the feature allows some classic rule-based segmentation. For instance, users who've completed a target event, like a purchase 3 months ago, 6 months ago, but who've been inactive recently. So I think that's one of the most common use cases we see at Adikteev on the remarketing side. This is supported, for instance. So that's an example of a classic rule-based audience, and this kind of settings can be configured in Android to create an audience and then re-engage those users easily. Now, the third step, the third point that I wanted to mention is that each audience is linked to a DSP on Android. That's I think that's a key aspect to consider for advertisers, because today they may be used to sharing the same audiences with their multiple partners, which is great. But in the future, there will be a bit more, I would say, inertia in doing so. It's going to be a bit more constrained, because from a technical perspective, each audience is linked to a buyer. So if you want to work with multiple buyers on the same audiences, you may have to replicate the audiences and basically work around the different privacy constraints that come with the audiences. So that are the three key aspects from the DSP perspective on the audience management. So Roy mentioned also earlier the use case of audience management and the fact that an SDK was needed to manage audiences. So that was also a big question for us as a remarketing DSP, because today we don't rely on an SDK to work with advertisers because we don't have to. Basically, today advertisers are free to share either the user events through the MMP, or they can send out directly to us their audiences from their analytics infrastructure. So the need of an SDK is not there today. However, this protected audience API service needs an SDK, because we need to be on the device to configure the Android APIs, basically. So in the future, Adikteev will send the audience management needs to AppsFlyer with a server-to-server integration. And AppsFlyer, thanks to their SDK, will relay those instructions to the device. So I think that's a great, a great opportunity and a great feature, great flexibility that this protected audience API service offers to the ecosystem, because otherwise it would have meant that advertisers need to install new SDKs for their buyers, or they need to give up remarketing. So that would have made things way more complicated. But here, the key things to note is that remarketing is going to be possible at scale without having to install a new SDK from the DSPs. With the SDK of the MMP, it should be enough to manage the audiences as before. So again, also opening the door, like Roy did earlier. If anyone is on the advertiser side, is willing to deep dive into those questions of the DSP perspective, we at Adikteev have been working on this project together jointly with Google and AppsFlyer for since the beginning of the Android project, and we're happy to deep dive even further with some specific use cases.
Awesome. Thanks, Loic. So I think we have a couple of questions from the audience. We have quite a few, actually. Let me 1 sec. I'll stop screen sharing. Okay. So I think first question to you, Loic. Yeah, I think you pretty much touched on that, but how does protected audiences API work on the ad network side?
Yeah, so ad network, ad network, let's say on the buyer, on the media buyer side. I think, yeah, we saw the process earlier. It's the first step is to create an audience, like people you want to remarket. So this is going to be configured in Android, right? What I can add also is that doing so, an audience will also be submitted to Android with a list of creatives that go with this audience. So I think that that matters because you have to know beforehand what creatives you want to bid on for a specific audience, even though you can refresh this list afterwards. So registering an audience, associating it to you as a media buyer with the creatives is the first step. Then the following steps, I would say, are more classic. Ad network will start receiving ad requests for the devices belonging to the audience, including the name of the audience, but not the specific identifier of the device. And finally, knowing those signals, ad networks will be able to place their bids, select their creatives, and then if they win, report impressions, etc. So that's the main steps.
Cool. This one's actually, I think, for you, Trenton. How will users be reached in case of remarketing, and how will it be different from the past?
Yeah, great question. So like Ray, I think both of you have touched on this quite a bit already on like how can ad tech start building upon the protected audience API. So I'll try to keep things brief and not repeat myself too much on some of those things, but essentially the protected audience API on Android has always had remarketing as its core use case. And it is designed to support remarketing in a privacy safe way without the need of ad ID or other cross-app identifiers. You know, as you guys said, the basic design of it involves an advertiser registering a custom audience on the device when the user completes an activity. My usual example is like filling a shopping cart, but not completing that purchase. So when joining the custom audience, the buyer will include relevant ads associated with that abandoned cart. And then essentially when an auction happens later in a publisher app or from another application, that custom audience and all of its associated ads are made available to the protected audience auction and can be bid upon appropriately during that auction.
Cool. And by the way, how does it, maybe this is one is for me, you touched on we touched on remarketing. The question was on remarketing, but what is it like to also on the user acquisition front? How will that be different from the way it used to work and the way it's going to work with protected audiences API?
Yeah, another good question. So user acquisition, or more specifically, app install ads, it's a bit more challenging to do with the protected audiences than and remarketing, because it typically relies on multi-app data associated with the ad ID. We don't currently have a tailored solution for app install ads. So previously, we have suggested using a combination of topics, app install filtering, and custom audiences, all provided by the Android Privacy Sandbox. However, we are actively exploring app install ads, user acquisition, and the problem much further, and we do hope to have some updates in the near future.
Cool. This one is for me, how are MMPs going to support protected audiences API? So I think we also covered this one pretty much. I think maybe this answer splits into two actually. One is obviously, and same with the attribution API, building an off-the-shelf product, right? This simply is something to manage your audiences with an SDK, etc. But what the other thing is that is extremely important is everything that we're doing right now, and what Loic and I were mentioning mostly is the communication between us that will take place in terms in APIs, basically. So if any audience which was created anywhere, we really need to communicate better than ever. Just like Luik was sharing, they have a lot of reliance on MMPs now with their SDK to actually define an audience. So I think this will be very, very important in the future for managing audiences and adding different audiences via MMP SDK. And this can be also not just limited to DSPs, but any audience creation, first party, CRM, anything owned media, anything that you would want to create audience for will require this integration. It's going to be an interesting time. Okay, more questions, and some are new. I think this one, okay, for you, I think, Luik, any case studies on how ROI, CPA, CPI will be impacted? What should agencies be doing to make sure their clients are ready? Is there any proactive measure they can take today?
Yeah, a great question. I think it's we can feel that it's becoming real, right? So that's great. It's never too late to start preparing. So my first thoughts, for someone on the agency side, also on an advertiser side who wants to, step into the topic, would actually be to, get familiar as a first priority with the attribution API and make sure their own KPIs as a company can be measured within the Privacy Sandbox framework and without a GAID, because visibility on performance is key to allocate budgets and also whether there's ROI, etc. So we've seen that this Privacy Sandbox framework will add some constraints. You need to check that your KPIs can be measured. That's the first thing. Now, on top of my head, I would say that first, if you have KPIs that have a longer attribution window than 30 days, probably they're going to be they're not going to work out of the box anymore, because maximum window, as you mentioned, Roy, is 30 days. Even if specifications are evolving every day, so far it's like that. But everything like your CPA optimization or etc., like as long as it's not on a too long window, will be fine. And maybe lastly, so for ROI or ROAS optimization, this will be as always a bit more challenging, because you have more constraints with granular revenue data. So far it's planned by Privacy Sandbox to make it available in aggregated reporting, but not in a very event level reporting. So this might be a bit more challenging for, I would say, the most sophisticated buyers and agencies who do like a event level optimization. However, it's probably a bit too soon to give real case studies outputs because it's still in development.
Cool, thank you. Next question for Trenton. Best practices for advertisers to prepare for 2024 cookieless changes. I think it's similar in a sense.
Yeah, thank you for this question. And I guess I would say, like, I'll share a little bit of a broader view on this question, and then also maybe go a little bit in a different direction, so to speak, and speak from more of the Android point of view and not directly to advertisers. So first, like, I would say, like, you're all doing great just by being here and engaging. Like, now is the time to continue to work with your partners throughout the ecosystem on, really what does a privacy focused solution for like audience management, and what does that look like? I think that there is a great opportunity for the industry to work together over the coming months and really start to rethink how advertisers and publishers can deliver, great experiences, support their business models, all without tracking users across apps. Getting a bit more honed in, I would say for like ad techs or app developers, I would encourage you to start testing the APIs, continue providing that feedback. For, I would say, like the app developers, publishers, advertisers that rely on third parties for their advertising related services, I would start asking your providers about their testing roadmap, understand how you can start participating in early testing, and then to kind of pivot just a little bit more and get more tactical, I would say you should start with identifying like what are your top use cases, design against the privacy sandbox for those solutions. One of the examples, and one we've talked about quite a bit here, would be, how do you do your audience activation? The protected audience requires the protected audience API, sorry about that, requires that an advertiser and their ad tech partners to define and join a custom audience as the user is interacting with the app. And today you can start by designing, testing, using the protected audience APIs to join the custom audience, configure an auction, participate in that auction. So that's really one tactical thing you can start working on now, and evaluating how that will impact your current marketing, your remarketing use cases.
Cool. I think one here is one I can take. How quickly do you expect the industry to adopt Sandbox? Okay, so yeah, quite general. But again, I want to make the distinction because I hear it quite often. So of Sandbox and a lot of references specifically to the attribution API, and Sandbox is several solutions. All right. And I actually expect it really depends on a lot of things. One is obviously releasing everything out to the market by Google on all devices, etc., etc. This is obviously the first part, which is going very well, and we expect in 2024. Another thing, obviously, again, is advertisers, MMPs, ad networks, supply side publishers. I actually expect that protected audiences API is going to be integrated, adopted faster than attribution API, because as far as I can see it, it's less disruptive and can work well simultaneously. Although attribution API can also work well simultaneously. But anyway, to cut short, I believe these solutions will be adopted quite heavily during 2024. This is just a prediction. It really depends on a lot of players in the market. We are here trying to advocate, trying to push this forward. But there are a lot of unknown variables here. So yes, I believe this will happen. Loic, you want to add?
Yeah, maybe just like a follow-up question for you. Like, don't you think that's basically for publishers who've adopted already something like SKAd network, which is also like a privacy-first, attribution system, like adopting Privacy Sandbox attribution API will be much faster?
Yeah, I just perhaps I don't know. There are a lot of again, a lot of variables. I think the attribution API, by the way, is more robust than SKAd network, but but at the same time, it's also a bit more complicated for all parties. And I do think, again, people are afraid to touch attribution more than remarketing, but again, maybe that's just my assumption here. Both again, I expect to be adopted in 2024. What else? I see a few more questions, but I think we're going to keep it short. I see some questions on the attribution API, although the focus is on protected audiences API. I see one that we've answered is the attribution API, basically the equivalent of SKAd network for Android. So the answer is yes and no. I think I covered that just perhaps much more robust. Let's see how. Another one on attribution API. What info can we inject in the Google View click event? Is it still possible to make LTV campaigns? Google Advertising ID will be deleted or not? Privacy for Android release date. Okay, so a lot of questions in just one question. Let me try to address it at once. Maybe they meant kind, but what kind of info can we inject in the Google View click event? I assume they refer to Google Ads, and for that, I do not know what to answer. So that's neither of us. And then, is it possible to make LTV campaigns? So yes, the answer is yes. Up to 30 days of LTV measurement is going to be available on the attribution API. Google Advertising ID will be deleted, yes or no? I don't want to make that statement. I believe none of us would want to make the statement. We don't know for now. Release date, again, I think we don't have an exact one yet. What else am I seeing here? Yeah, I think there's there's a long question, but actually a good ending to the question. So how will remarketing look like in the future, etc.? So I think we all try to answer it, but there's one thing here is that, are there any benefits to how remarketing is going to look like with regards to protected audiences API? Loic, maybe you want to take this, and maybe this will be the last one.
Yeah. Well, from our perspective, for sure, the main benefits, that's what we started the presentation with, is about privacy. So we're going to keep the use case, keep the scale. Unlike on iOS, we're losing the device ID with no replacement, lower the scale. Here we're going to keep the scale, keep the use case, but the main benefit will be privacy. So that's a very clear win. So when it comes to limitations, I think it's, we said it earlier. You mentioned it earlier, Trent, but so far app install campaigns might be a bit more challenging under this framework, because today we know that they heavily rely on device graphs, cross-app device graphs, and this kind of thing. So it's not going to be possible anymore if GID is removed. So here limitations are quite clear. And on the benefit side, so that's my personal opinion, I don't think it's supported yet, but when thinking about the fact that Privacy Sandbox is a common project to Android and to Chrome, the browser. Personally, something that I'd love to see is, being able to share audiences between Android and Chrome, so that you have an ecosystem that regroups the remarketing possibilities both in web mobile and on and in-app, right? So that's that could be, at least on paper, I'm not from Google, but on paper it could be something really fun to unlock, even though I don't think it's in the scope yet.
I actually want to add one more benefit that I've been hearing from advertisers, and it's also about business data sensitivity. So many times advertisers do want to create an audience, but the audience is sensitive and they don't want to share user identifiers of this audience with the world. For example, very high payers or etc. And they don't want to, they do want to remarket to these users, but they don't want to share the identifiers of these users to the world, basically. And this is basically solved in Protected Audiences API, so they can remarket without sharing who the users are or their identifiers. So this is also something really cool, a cool benefit that actually opens up new opportunities rather than the world before. Guys, I think I will wrap it up with this question. I'd like to thank you very much for joining. Anything else, one last thing to say? You're good?
Well, on our side, we're active beta testers of the feature and of the project, and we'll keep on doing so. So again, feel free to reach out if you want to have any more details about different features and stuff.
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you, folks, for having me. And really, we're excited to see, the ecosystem leaning to the platform and the APIs, specifically, remarketing, at least from my scope and focus. So it's exciting to see folks starting to engage, continue to provide that feedback as we, continue to further ramp up the APIs, make them available for testing, and circulate on much of that feedback. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.